September 3, 1939. 11:47 hours. A concrete bunker on the French side of the Maginot Line, 8 kilometers northeast of Saarbrücken. The observation post looks directly into German territory across a narrow valley. Visibility is excellent, clear September morning, no fog, light wind from the west. Commandant Pierre Arnaud stands at the observation slit with binoculars pressed to his face. Below him, artillery positions are manned and ready. 42 guns. Range is calculated and confirmed. Fire plans distributed. Ammunition stacked and prepared. Telephone lines tested. Radio communication established. Everything functions exactly as designed. Across the valley, German positions are visible. Bunkers, machine gun nests. The border itself, marked by posts and wire, runs along the valley floor. Beyond it, German territory extends east. Empty fields, a farmhouse, a road, all within range. France declared war on Germany at 11:00 hours, 47 minutes ago. Britain declared war at the same time. The formal state of hostilities now exists. The alliance obligations triggered by Germany's invasion of Poland are now in effect. Arnaud lowers his binoculars. His artillery commander stands beside him, awaiting orders. The fire plan is ready. The war plan calls for immediate offensive action, artillery bombardment followed by infantry advance. The plan was finalized weeks ago. All units have been briefed. The order to execute requires only Arnaud's word. He does not give it. He continues to observe. The German positions remain quiet. No movement, no activity. The valley is silent. The French Third Army held this sector of the border, the Saar region, approximately 30 kilometers of front between Luxembourg and the Rhine. The Maginot Line fortifications in this area were among the most developed sections of the defensive system. Artillery was positioned in protected casemates. Infantry held prepared positions. Supply lines were established. Communications were redundant. German forces opposite the French positions were estimated at division strength, approximately 12,000 men spread across multiple defensive points. Intelligence assessments suggested these were second-line units, not the formations engaged in Poland. The Germans had prioritized the eastern campaign. The western border was held by reserves and older troops. French war planning assumed that in the event of conflict with Germany, France would launch an offensive into the Saar region within days of mobilization. The plan was designated Operation Saar and called for coordinated attacks along multiple axes. The objective was to seize German territory, threaten industrial centers, and draw German forces away from Poland. The rationale was strategic and political. Poland was an ally. Germany was now at war on two fronts. A French offensive would force Germany to divert resources from Poland to defend the West. This would relieve pressure on Polish forces and demonstrate Franco-British resolve to their ally. Arnaud commanded the 47th Fortress Regiment, responsible for a 4-kilometer sector. His orders, received by courier at 09:00 hours, were explicit. Upon declaration of war, commence artillery preparation of German positions. Duration, 30 minutes. Then advance reconnaissance elements to assess damage and locate enemy strongpoints. Main infantry assault would follow within 24 hours if reconnaissance was successful. The artillery fire plan had been rehearsed. Target coordinates were pre-registered. Each battery knew its assigned sectors. Ammunition expenditure was calculated. Medical evacuation routes were prepared. The operation was comprehensive and detailed. It existed in written form: maps, timetables, unit assignments, communication protocols. Arnaud's role was to initiate the sequence. The order to open fire would trigger the artillery preparation. That would commit the regiment to the war plan. Once begun, the operation would proceed according to doctrine and hierarchy. Arnaud's decision was binary: execute or delay. French artillery doctrine in 1939 emphasized preparation fire before infantry operations. The lessons of the previous war, 25 years earlier, had been absorbed into military training. Artillery neutralized enemy positions, suppressed defensive fire, and demoralized defenders. Infantry advanced behind a curtain of exploding shells. This was standard procedure, taught at every level of command. Arnaud had commanded artillery units for 15 years. He understood the mechanics of bombardment, the calculations of range and trajectory, the timing of salvos, the coordination between observation and fire direction. He had overseen live-fire exercises. He had planned operations in theoretical scenarios. His training prepared him for exactly this moment. The men under his command were similarly prepared. Battery commanders knew their roles. Gun crews had drilled repeatedly. Ammunition handlers had practiced their movements. Telephone operators maintained continuous contact with each position. The system was designed to function efficiently once activated. The expectation within the regiment was that war with Germany would involve immediate combat. Mobilization had occurred 3 days earlier. Units had moved to forward positions. The transition from peacetime garrison duty to combat readiness had been executed smoothly. The men understood that conflict was imminent. The declaration of war at 11:00 hours confirmed what they had anticipated. The fire plan itself represented months of staff work. Intelligence officers had identified German positions. Engineers had surveyed terrain. Mathematicians had calculated trajectories. The plan was not improvised. It was the product of systematic analysis and preparation. Executing it was a matter of following established procedure. At 11:45 hours, Arnaud had received a telephone call from division headquarters confirming the declaration of war. The staff officer who called stated that operations would proceed according to plan. No modifications were announced. The regiment was authorized to commence fire at Arnaud's discretion. The timing was left to local commanders who could observe conditions and choose optimal moments. Arnaud acknowledged the call and informed his artillery commander to prepare for immediate execution. The artillery commander relayed instructions to battery commanders. Gun crews stood ready. Breech mechanisms were opened. Shells were positioned. Elevation and traverse were set. The final step, loading and firing, awaited only the command. At 11:47, Arnaud returned to the observation post. He intended to observe the target area one final time before giving the order. This was standard practice: confirm targets, verify no friendly forces in the impact zone, ensure observation was adequate for fire adjustment. He raised his binoculars and scanned the German positions. 11:48 hours. Arnaud lowers the binoculars. He turns to his artillery commander and opens his mouth to give the order. The word does not come. He pauses, looks again through the observation slit. The German positions are unchanged, quiet, static. No activity that would indicate preparation for offensive action. No movement suggesting imminent attack. The artillery commander waits. The silence extends. 5 seconds, 10. The commander shifts his weight. He does not prompt. Protocol dictates that he waits for the commandant's order. Arnaud sets the binoculars on the shelf beneath the observation slit. He steps back from the opening. He looks at the map spread on the table in the center of the bunker. The fire plan, the target coordinates, the schedule of fires. He picks up the telephone connecting the observation post to division headquarters. He does not dial. He holds the receiver for a moment, then replaces it. The artillery commander asks if there is a problem with the fire plan. Arnaud says no. The plan is sound. He asks the commander how long to prepare the guns for extended storage. The commander says 4 hours to secure ammunition and return guns to standby status. Arnaud tells him to do that. Begin securing the battery. Do not fire. The artillery commander asks for confirmation. Arnaud repeats the instruction. Secure the guns, cease combat readiness, return to standby status. The commander acknowledges and exits the bunker to relay the orders. 11:49 hours. 1 minute has passed. The war plan has not been executed. Arnaud sits at the table and looks at the maps. He does not write anything. He does not make a telephone call. He sits in silence. The battery commanders received the stand-down order with confusion. Gun crews had been at full readiness. Ammunition was prepared. Targets were registered. The order to cease operations without firing contradicts the war plan and the state of declared war. One battery commander telephones the observation post and requests clarification. Is this a temporary delay? Is new targeting information being processed? Arnaud responds that the battery is to secure and return to standby. No further explanation. The battery commander acknowledges. At 12:00 hours, the division headquarters telephones Arnaud. A staff colonel asks for the regiment's status. Arnaud reports that his sector is secure and under observation. The colonel asks if the artillery preparation has commenced. Arnaud says it has not. The colonel asks why. Arnaud states that he assessed conditions as not requiring immediate fire. The colonel is silent for several seconds, then asks if Arnaud is refusing to execute the operation. Arnaud says he is exercising tactical discretion regarding timing. The colonel instructs Arnaud to stand by for further communication. The call ends. The men of the regiment do not understand the situation. They have been told war is declared. They have been prepared to execute offensive operations. Now they are told to stand down. No combat has occurred. No shots have been fired. The German positions across the valley remain as they were. 12:30, another call from division headquarters. A general officer this time. He instructs Arnaud to prepare a written report explaining his decision not to execute the fire plan. Arnaud acknowledges. The general states that all offensive operations along the Saar front are being reviewed at army level. Pending guidance from higher command, local commanders are to maintain defensive posture and avoid initiating combat unless directly attacked. Arnaud confirms understanding. The call ends. The order effectively suspends the war plan. Not officially canceled, but postponed indefinitely pending review. Other regiments along the line receive similar instructions over the following hours. The coordinated offensive envisioned in Operation Saar does not commence. Artillery remains silent. Infantry remains in positions. The border remains static. By 14:00 hours, the 47th Regiment has fully transitioned from offensive readiness to defensive watch. Ammunition is stored. Gun crews are rotated to reduced manning. Observation continues, but fire missions are not prepared. The situation stabilizes into a holding pattern. Arnaud remains in the observation post through the afternoon. He watches the German positions. They show no sign of activity, no reinforcement, no preparation for offensive action. The valley remains quiet. Arnaud's decision not to execute the fire plan was not based on tactical concerns about the plan itself. The plan was sound. The targets were appropriate. The artillery was adequate. Success was likely in purely military terms. His decision was based on observation and assessment of what would follow. The war plan called for artillery fire to begin the operation, but Arnaud recognized that once artillery fired, the sequence became irreversible. Infantry would advance. German forces would respond. Combat would develop. Casualties would occur. The sector would transition from peace to active warfare. Observing the German positions, Arnaud saw no indication that Germany intended to attack westward. The forces opposite his regiment were defensive, static positions, minimal activity, no offensive preparations. Germany's strategic focus was clearly in Poland. The western border was a secondary concern for German command. If France initiated offensive action, Germany would be forced to respond. Troops would be redirected from Poland. The Western Front would become active, but if France refrained from attacking, the western border might remain quiet. The war would be contained to Poland. French and German forces would observe each other across the border but not engage. Arnaud calculated that executing the war plan would create the very combat it was designed to exploit. The plan assumed Germany would fight on two fronts simultaneously. But if France attacked, Germany would have no choice but to fight on two fronts. The plan was self-fulfilling. Refraining from attack might prevent the combat entirely. This assessment was tactical, not political. Arnaud was not making strategic policy. He was observing that the military situation did not match the assumptions underlying the war plan. The plan anticipated German aggression westward. No such aggression was evident. Executing the plan without that aggression seemed premature. He also recognized that his decision was being made at 11:48 on September 3, 1 hour after the declaration of war. The political situation was fluid. Diplomatic communications might still be occurring. Higher command might be receiving instructions from government level that had not yet filtered down to regimental commanders. Acting precipitously might foreclose options that senior leadership wanted to preserve. The telephone call at 12:30 confirmed this assessment. The general's instruction to await guidance indicated that Army Command was reconsidering offensive operations. Arnaud's decision not to fire aligned with what higher command ultimately decided. Whether he anticipated this or simply paused long enough for it to become clear is unknowable. What is certain is that in the minute between 11:48 and 11:49, Arnaud chose not to execute the war plan he had been ordered to implement. That choice was individual, immediate, and consequential for his regiment. It prevented the initiation of combat in his sector. The 47th Regiment spent the remainder of September 3 and the following days in defensive posture. Observation continued. German positions were monitored. No hostile action occurred. No French offensive was launched. The border remained static. On September 4, formal instructions arrived from Army Command suspending offensive operations. All units were directed to maintain defensive positions and avoid initiating combat. The rationale was not explained in the orders. Commanders were told to await further instructions. Operation Saar, the planned offensive into German territory, was quietly shelved. The mobilization and positioning of forces continued, but no combat operations were authorized. The period that became known as the Phony War had begun, a state of declared war without active combat on the Western Front. Arnaud's regiment remained in position through the autumn and winter of 1939–1940. Routine watch rotations, maintenance of equipment, training exercises. The men lived in the fortifications, observing an enemy who observed them in return. Occasional exchanges of artillery fire occurred, limited, brief, more symbolic than tactical, but no major operations were conducted. The written report Arnaud was ordered to prepare was completed and submitted on September 5. It was brief. He stated that he had assessed the tactical situation at 11:48 on September 3 and determined that immediate execution of the fire plan was not necessary. He noted that German forces showed no offensive intent. He concluded that maintaining observation without initiating fire was the appropriate action given available information. The report was received at division and forwarded to Army level. No response was ever communicated to Arnaud. No commendation. No reprimand. Report was filed. The incident was not investigated or discussed further. Arnaud's artillery commander asked him privately on September 6 why he had decided not to fire. Arnaud said he saw no reason to shoot at Germans who were not shooting at him. The artillery commander accepted this, and the conversation ended. The regiment's war diary for September 3, 1939, contains a single entry noting the declaration of war and the regiment's status. Defensive positions manned. Observation maintained. No contact with enemy forces. The entry is routine and provides no indication that a planned offensive had been prepared and then not executed. The collapse of Operation Saar as a functional war plan occurred not through high-level decision-making, but through the accumulated inaction of commanders like Arnaud along the front. Multiple regimental commanders facing similar situations made similar assessments. When the order came to execute offensive operations, many delayed. They requested clarification. They awaited further instructions. The collective hesitation created space for Army Command to reconsider. Army-level records show that on September 3 and 4, staff officers fielded numerous inquiries from subordinate units about the offensive plan. Commanders reported that German forces appeared defensive and unprepared. Some noted that advancing would require crossing difficult terrain under observation. Others expressed concern about logistics and support. The cumulative effect was to slow the planned operation before it began. By September 5, the decision had been made at government level to refrain from major offensive action. The rationale was complex, military, political, diplomatic, but the practical effect was that the war plan prepared over months was rendered inoperative. The plan remained in files and briefing documents, but it was never executed. Arnaud's individual decision at 11:48 on September 3 was one small component of this larger pattern. His choice not to fire did not determine the outcome. Other factors at higher levels were decisive. But his choice contributed to the operational environment that made the larger decision possible. Had he fired, his regiment would have been committed to combat. Other units would have followed. The momentum toward general offensive action would have been harder to reverse. The war plan collapsed in 1 minute not because orders were countermanded, but because a commander chose not to execute them. The minute between 11:48 and 11:49 was the moment when the plan existed as potential and could still be left unexecuted. After 11:49, with the order to stand down given, the plan began its transition from active to archived. No formal documentation exists analyzing why Operation Saar was not executed as planned. Post-war histories mention it briefly as an example of Franco-British reluctance to engage Germany offensively in 1939. The specific decisions of individual commanders are not examined. The records are fragmentary and bureaucratic: status reports, movement orders, logistical summaries. The decision-making process is invisible. Pierre Arnaud remained in command of the 47th Regiment through the winter of 1939–1940. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its offensive westward. The Maginot Line was bypassed through Belgium. Arnaud's regiment was not directly engaged in the initial German breakthrough, but was caught in the general collapse of French defensive positions. The regiment retreated westward with other French forces in late May. Arnaud was wounded by artillery fragments on May 28 near Lille. He was evacuated and hospitalized. He did not return to active service before France signed the armistice with Germany on June 22. After the armistice, Arnaud retired from military service. He returned to his family home in Alsace, which was now under German occupation. He lived quietly through the occupation years. He was not involved in resistance activities. He survived the war and remained in Alsace after liberation in 1944. In 1947, he was interviewed by a military historian researching the Maginot Line's role in the 1940 campaign. The interview covered general topics: fortification design, manning levels, supply systems. Arnaud did not mention the events of September 3, 1939. The historian did not ask about the decision not to execute Operation Saar. Arnaud died in 1963 at age 69. His military service records are archived in French military repositories. They contain routine documentation of his career. The report he wrote on September 5, 1939, explaining his decision not to fire on September 3, is not among his personal file. It may have been destroyed during the 1940 campaign or lost in post-war archival reorganization. The 47th Fortress Regiment was dissolved after the 1940 armistice. Unit records were scattered. Some were captured by German forces. Some were lost during the retreat. The regiment's war diary, which would have contained day-to-day entries for September 1939, has not been located in accessible archives. Of the men who served in the regiment on September 3, 1939, most are now deceased. A handful participated in oral history projects in the 1970s and 1980s. They described the period of the phony war, the waiting, the routine, the sense of unreality about being at war without fighting. None specifically recalled the moment when the order to commence offensive operations was given and then rescinded. The war plan that collapsed in 1 minute left no monument, no commemoration, no historical marker. It exists in archives as a document, maps, orders, schedules, but not as an event. A fire plan prepared over months, target coordinates calculated, ammunition positioned, gun crews ready, a telephone call confirming declaration of war, an order expected and anticipated, a minute of silence in a concrete bunker. 11:48 hours. A commander looks through binoculars at an empty valley. He sees German positions but no German threat. He prepares to give the order that would begin the operation. The word does not come. The silence extends. He steps back from the observation slit. He tells his artillery commander to stand down. The guns do not fire. The war plan existed in complete form, documented, briefed, rehearsed. It existed as intention and preparation. It existed until 11:49 on September 3, 1939. Then it ceased to exist as an operational reality. It remained on paper but not in action. The plan collapsed not through countermand or revision, but through a decision not to begin. Pierre Arnaud's choice was individual and local. He commanded one regiment on one sector of the front. His decision affected his unit. But his unit's inaction contributed to the pattern of inaction along the line. The offensive did not occur in his sector because he chose not to initiate it. The offensive did not occur elsewhere for similar and different reasons. The minute between 11:48 and 11:49 was the moment when the war plan was still possible and already becoming impossible. After that minute, the momentum toward execution dissipated. The plan remained available. It could have been resurrected and executed later, but it never was. The moment passed. The plan collapsed. No record preserves what Arnaud thought during that minute. His report written 2 days later explained his decision in tactical terms. It did not describe internal deliberation or doubt. The minute is silent in documentation. It exists as a gap between anticipated action and actual inaction. The war plan that collapsed in 1 minute left no trace except the absence of combat that would have occurred had the plan been executed. The artillery that did not fire, the infantry that did not advance, the casualties that did not occur, the German response that was not triggered, the valley that remained quiet, the silence that held.